The knock on my cabin door came with the urgency of a warrant. Sharp and mechanical 3 raps, a pause, then 2 more. It was the kind of knock that wasn't asking, it was demanding. I wiped my hands on a rag and swung the door open. There she stood, mid-50s, visor tight against her frosted blonde bob, clipboard hugged to her chest like a badge of honor. Her sunglasses were the kind that costs more than a month's groceries, and her smile had the brittle shine of someone used to winning arguments by volume alone. "Good morning," she chirped in that sing-song tone fake friendly people used before delivering bad news. "I'm Cheryl Davenport, president of the Lakeshore Serenity Homeowners Association." I eyed the clipboard. "Not interested." She blinked like I'd slapped her. "I'm afraid that's not how this works," she said. "Your property falls within our jurisdiction now. You should have received a notice last month." "No notice. And this isn't an HOA neighborhood. This is private land." "Oh, we've expanded," she said smoothly. "Annexed the whole lakeside region last quarter. New bylaw revisions. You'll find everything detailed in your welcome packet." I crossed my arms, catching the scent of her perfume, something floral and expensive, layered over the faint rot of old entitlement. "This cabin's been in my family for generations," I said. "We're not part of your development. We never signed anything. There's no expansion that applies to me." She stepped forward, her white flats crunching on the gravel of my porch. "Mr. Walker," she said, as if my name was a problem she intended to solve. "With all due respect, the HOA charter supersedes individual land claims under our newly voted boundary ordinance. That legal nonsense might scare the folks down the hill," I said calmly. "But you're barking up the wrong tree." Her smile wavered. "You're currently in violation of several regulations. That fence is 4 inches too high. The mailbox is not uniform. Your firewood stack exceeds code. And the lawn, well, we don't allow overgrowth." I glanced over my shoulder at the wild patch of earth surrounding the cabin. It wasn't overgrown, it was nature. Birds lived in those bushes. Deer passed through that tall grass. That yard had roots older than any HOA charter. "I'm not changing a damn thing," I said. "Not for you. Not for your board." Her jaw tightened. "Non-compliance will lead to citations, escalating fines, and eventual legal action." I laughed. Not loud, not mocking, just enough to make her bristle. "You don't have jurisdiction here," I said. "You've mistaken peace for weakness." HOA Karen, as she was known by half the county, tilted her chin. "We'll see what the authorities think." With that, she pivoted on her heels, marched down my steps, and drove off in her gleaming white Lexus, her license plate reading S3R3NITY. I stood on the porch a moment longer, listening to the quiet return to my cabin like an old dog settling back down after a false alarm. I wasn't worried. The land was mine, every acre from the cabin to the tree line and a good stretch beyond. My great-grandfather had cleared it with his bare hands. My grandfather had built this cabin one summer during the war, and I'd come back here after 20 years in the Marines to retire, rebuild, and breathe again. I didn't belong to anyone's committee. But Karen wasn't done the next day. I found a bright yellow notice nailed to my door. HOA violation code 14B, unauthorized landscaping, fine pending, $500. The day after that, another code 2 to C, non-standard mailbox, fine pending, $750. Then came the unannounced inspections, strange men snapping photos from the road, a clipboard-wielding enforcer walking my property line like it was up for auction, even a drone hovering over my chimney at sunset. It would have been laughable if it weren't so calculated. She wasn't trying to enforce rules. She was trying to break me. By day 6, I'd had enough. I sat down at my kitchen table, dusted off the old leather-bound folder marked Walker Land Trust, and opened it to the first page. There, notarized and sealed, was the deed to the land. Not just this cabin, not just this lakeside, but the entire unincorporated stretch that Karen's little HOA pretended to govern. A slow smile crept across my face. If she wanted a war, she'd just picked it with the wrong man and the wrong county. The first fine was petty. The second was ridiculous. By the 5th, I stopped reading them. Each envelope came sealed with the Lakeshore Serenity HOA crest, a watercolor duck gliding across a lake, and was stuffed with accusations that would have been laughable if they weren't so brazen. Unapproved door color, visible trash bins, even excessive wind chimes. I didn't have wind chimes. Karen was playing games now, and she wasn't playing fair. But I wasn't the type to roll over. I'd spent most of my life dealing with worse bullies than a middle-aged HOA tyrant with a clipboard complex. This wasn't about lawn care or mailbox design. This was about control, and she was testing how much of mine I'd surrender before I pushed back. The answer: none. I made a few calls, drove to the county recorder's office, and requested certified copies of my property line surveys, deeds, and historic exemption status. I even unearthed a lease agreement my grandfather signed with a regional developer back in the 80s, an agreement that allowed them to build homes on his land only under strict conditions, one of which included a clause excluding government's homeowner enforcement bodies. In short, the HOA legally had no right to exist on this soil. Not then, not now. Karen didn't know it yet, but she was trespassing with every warning she sent. Still, she doubled down. 2 contractors arrived on a Friday morning without so much as a knock, measuring my fence like they were bidding on a prison expansion. When I stepped outside and asked what they thought they were doing, one muttered something about HOA work orders and kept scribbling. I told them to leave. One gave me attitude, so I fired up my chainsaw. They left. Later that night, I installed trail cams across the tree line. Not for animals, for them. Every flicker of movement would be documented, every trespasser's license plate recorded. I had the uneasy feeling Karen wasn't finished. I was right. A week later, I came home to find an animal control notice posted to my cabin wall, accusing my 2 dogs, Buck and Gracie, of being public hazards. The report claimed they were unleashed, aggressive, and uncontrolled. Never mind the fact they rarely left my side and had never so much as growled at a stranger. The officer who showed up was young, clearly uncomfortable and apologetic. After meeting the dogs and seeing their tags, he offered a tight smile. "Between us," he said quietly, "we've been getting a lot of calls from your HOA president lately. Half of them are nonsense." I nodded. "Thanks for your honesty." He handed me a copy of the complaint and left that evening. I poured a bourbon, sat on the porch and read the complaint line by line. It was clearly written by someone who had never been within 30 feet of my property. It mentioned a large black dog, even though both of mine were brown labs. It said they were seen wandering near the cul-de-sac. I didn't have a cul-de-sac. I had a dirt path and a trout stream. Karen wasn't documenting violations. She was fabricating them. She wanted a paper trail, one that made me look like a threat, a nuisance, someone who didn't belong in her pristine HOA fantasy. But here's the thing about paper trails. They go both ways. By then, I had a folder full of her violations, trespassing photos, falsified reports, even a recording of her shouting at a postal worker for delivering my mail in non-approved packaging. I had dates, names, signatures, and more importantly, patience. I wasn't going to play her game. I was going to end it. I sent her a certified letter. Nothing dramatic, just a formal cease and desist citing property law, harassment statutes, and my land deed. I included a printed map with the boundary lines clearly marked. I even highlighted the clause that stated, in plain legal terms, that HOA actions held no authority over my estate. I waited 3 days, no response. On the 4th, I woke up to the distant wail of sirens. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees. 3 patrol cars pulled up to my front gate, and behind them, emerging from her Lexus with the satisfaction of someone who thought she'd won her and she came to evict me, and she'd brought the law, only she didn't know which side of the law I stood on. The hum of tires on gravel echoed through the pines like a warning. I stepped off the porch with my morning coffee still in hand, shielding my eyes as 3 patrol cruisers crept down my long dirt drive, kicking dust into the morning light. Behind them, as expected, came the familiar white Lexus, shimmering smug and completely out of place out here in the wild. Karen stepped out before the lead cruiser had even parked. She was dressed like she was going to war, navy blue blazer, towering heels, and a thick folder of laminated papers hugged tightly under one arm. Her sunglasses reflected the flashing lights like they were her personal spotlight. The sheriff's deputies fanned out calmly, eyes scanning the property but weapons holstered, professional, controlled, but alert. The lead officer, a man in his 40s with a nonsense face and a jaw like an anvil, approached first. "Morning, sir. You, Mr. Walker?" I nodded. "That's me. Something I can help you with?" He glanced down at a report in his hand. "We received a call about a trespasser refusing to leave HOA property. Caller claims the individual has ignored multiple legal eviction notices and may be squatting." I didn't even need to look at Karen to feel the fire in her eyes. She was standing with her arms crossed now, lips pursed, nodding as if everything the officer said was already decided in her favor. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Well then," I said, calm and even, "we'd better clear this up fast, because I own this property, and I can prove it." I handed him the leather folder I'd prepared days earlier, the one containing the deed, county plat maps, zoning letters, and the original lease agreement from 1987 that Karen had clearly never seen. He started reading. Karen didn't like that. She's stalling. She blurted out, stepping forward like she was addressing her staff. "That land has been under HOA jurisdiction since our boundary expansion. He's non-compliant. That fence, that mailbox, he's refused every citation. He's hostile. You need to remove him now." The officer raised a hand without looking at her. "Ma'am, I'm reviewing legal documentation. Please stand back." Karen's jaw twitched. She didn't like being dismissed, especially not in front of her audience. Another deputy walked up, reading over the documents with the first. They whispered, checked seals, confirmed signatures. One of them pulled out a tablet and made a call. Karen was pacing now. Her confidence was cracking. Her rehearsed tone turned sharp. "You don't understand. He's been threatening contractors. He's got dogs running wild. He's endangering the community." The lead officer turned toward her slowly. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down." "No, you don't get it," she snapped. "This man is a threat to our homeowners. He's trespassing on HOA land and ma'am," he said again, firmer this time, According to these records, he owns the land your HOA sits on. Silence. The words hit harder than any siren. Karen blinked. What? Mr. Walker is the legal heir to the Walker Land Trust, the officer explained. This entire stretch of land, including your subdivision, is leased from his family's trust. Your HOA does not own the property. He does. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like she'd swallowed glass, but the charter doesn't override a county-level land lease, especially not one with legal immunity from HOA enforcement, which he held up a page. This agreement explicitly states. I took another sip of my coffee, savoring the silence that followed. The birds in the trees were louder than Karen now. The officer turned back to me. Would you like to press charges for false reporting and harassment? I eyed her carefully. Not yet. He raised an eyebrow. I have a better idea. I walked over to my truck, opened the back seat, and pulled out a thick stamped envelope, addressed to Lakeshore Serenity HOA Board of Directors. Karen stared at it like it was a loaded weapon. This is a formal notice of lease termination, I said, effective in 60 days. Due to repeated harassment, trespassing, and attempted seizure of private property, your board is being evicted. Your HOA no longer has a legal right to operate on my land. Karen stumbled backward. You can't do that. We're protected. We have bylaws. You had a lease, I corrected, and now you don't. Her face crumpled somewhere between rage and disbelief. The officer glanced between us, then stepped aside. Looks like this dispute's been settled, he said. No one argued as they pulled away. Karen, in the back of her Lexus, gripping her steering wheel like it might bite high, turned and looked out over the trees, the lake glinting in the distance. She'd tried to use the law to get rid of me. She didn't realize I was the law out here, and I'd just started to clean house. The fallout wasn't immediate, but it was swift. 3 days after the sheriff's visit, the Lakeshore Serenity HOA board held an emergency meeting in their community clubhouse. Karen, still clinging to her role like a throne made of paper, tried to spin the situation. He forged it, she insisted, voice trembling. There's no way one man can just revoke our entire HOA's right to exist. But the room had changed. Residents who once applauded her neighborhood pride now whispered behind folded arms. Some had already reviewed the documents I had posted online, the lease agreements, zoning maps, and scanned copies of the original land trust clauses. The truth was hard to swallow, but impossible to deny. I'd let the facts speak for themselves by the end of the week. 3 board members had resigned. Karen stayed. She always stayed too long. That following Monday, I filed the official eviction notice with the county clerk's office. The HOA had 60 days to vacate their authority. Their common areas, parks, fountains, even their pretentious duck-branded signage would revert to Walker Land Trust control. It wasn't just legal, it was personal. They had harassed me, slandered my name, tried to paint me as a threat to the very land my family had preserved for a century. Now the weight of their arrogance was collapsing inward. I didn't gloat. I prepared, with the help of a local attorney who'd grown up fishing on my side of the lake. I drafted new community terms, not rules but rights. Anyone living on Walker Trust land would be welcome to continue leasing free of HOA interference. No fines, no absurd restrictions, just simple maintenance guidelines and mutual respect. The proposals spread like wildfire within 2 weeks. Nearly 40 households had signed the new lease agreements, opting out of the HOA entirely. Parents cheered when they learned that kids could finally ride bikes without worrying about helmet citations. Veterans removed non-compliant flags from storage. Gardeners brought back their wildflowers. And the clubhouse. I shut it down then. I repurposed it. I turned the building into a community center free to use, open to all, funded by the same trust Karen had tried to erase. We hosted a barbecue the day after the lease termination went public. I supplied the food. The neighborhood brought the music. Karen didn't show, but her Lexus was spotted parked on the edge of the property, just outside the lease line. Watching stewing too. Weeks later, a U-Haul appeared in her driveway. No announcement. No goodbyes, just one woman, packing up the remnants of power she never truly owned. Her house went on the market under a third-party agent. She moved out quietly. The for sale sign had no HOA branding, just a small white sticker near the bottom that read, "Now, part of the Walker-free community." As for me, I went back to mornings on the porch, coffee in hand, Buck and Gracie asleep at my feet. The breeze off the lake felt different, like the land had exhaled for the first time in years, but I didn't forget. Bullies like Karen don't vanish. They regroup. They relocate. Somewhere out there, she's probably trying to wrangle control of another board, another block, another powerless group of neighbors. But here, she'd left a legacy of warnings. So I made one final addition. I mounted a hand-carved wooden sign at the entrance to the community trail, an old oak slab my grandfather had cut 50 years ago. It read, "Walker County lands established 1912, private property. No HOA authority. Respect the land. Respect each other." Below it, in small engraved letters, "We don't take kindly to trespassers or tyrants." And just like that, peace returned not just to the cabin, but to the people around it. Not because I won a fight, but because I reminded them whose land they stood on, and that sometimes the best way to defeat a tyrant is to let them call the cops on the man who owns the county.